And the longhouse system is overseen by women. It's matrilineal clan system. And those women choose the male leaders to represent the clan.
I'm Mitch.
And I'm Missy.
We're coworkers.
He's the boss, and we're married.
And she's the boss. Together, we host Good Faith Weekly, a podcast on faith and culture.
What could possibly go wrong?
Tune in and find out. Missy. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I catch up, and I discover the reason for my billfold being shy of $20 this week. Then later on in the pod, Missy and I sat down with Philip Arnold, who is the author of a brand new book titled The Urgency of Indigenous Values and a leader within the Doctrine of Discovery movement. It is a really moving episode that you're not going to want to miss. Stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, and you?
I'm all right. I feel like we have a question to answer.
Okay. Let the question immense.
It's the question we asked right before we hit record. I feel like our audience should be.
Oh, geez. Are we going to let them into our marital discussions?
Is this intro going to be a Monet or a Picasso?
Missy, it's always a Picasso. It's always a Picasso.
So that's the conclusion that we came to today, friends. As we confession time, we actually just got back from having dinner tonight. We actually cut out a little bit early, closed up shop, and went to dinner to try to decide how in the world to tackle this week's podcast, because quite frankly, the world is on fire. And
I mean, not only it's on fire, there's a lot of craziness going on in the world, and it feels, unfortunately, a little bit reflective of 2020 because there's so much chaos in the world going on right now.
And so many things that are so difficult to address. You and I have conversations on and on about the situation in the Middle East, and it is so nuanced and
it's
so
complicated. So complicated.
And I am so hesitant to put anything on tape because of the sensitivity of so many.
Yeah, but
anyways,
but I think that is an honest assessment where a majority of our listeners, a majority of those around the world are, because they understand the complexity of these issues and the history of the Middle East, the tension that has existed for decades within the Palestinian and Israeli conflict, and they don't know how to decipher or interpret the events that they have witnessed over the last 2 weeks. And so we just kind of sit numb because it all is so heavy and so heart-wrenching and devastating. It's just... It's so difficult.
I would take issue with one thing. I hope it's not numb, because as we get information...
Well, no, we sit in our numbness.
I just feel like we're all trying to work these things out in our mind.
Agreed.
You and I included, and therefore are being very protective of our words that we're putting
100%
in,
agree.
that we're cementing. So we kind of over dinner decided that we're just going, everyone in our listenership is probably inundated with information, with stories, with the atrocities, with the tragedy that are happening. So we just kind of started looking at some fun things to talk about, maybe as a bit of a reprieve. And so I'm going to start the episode with a confession that I haven't told you yet of something I did yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
Remember,
Okay.
Remember audience, Picasso is happening here. Okay. So, and I'm going to tell this story now. I've saved it because you can't get legitimately mad at me in front of everybody else, right?
Oh, sure I can. I can't vocalize it, but they can feel my anger rising.
So yesterday I did the thing that everybody wishes they could do each week. And I left home to go attend a middle school football game.
Indeed you did.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. On my way out the door, I knew I needed two things. Well, not more than two things, but I knew I needed $5 to get into the football game. And I also had like a few random items to pick up at the grocery store, like straws or one of those and deodorant or whatever. So I thought, oh, genius. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'm going by our neighborhood Walmart and I'm going to grab my groceries and some cash to go to the game.
Genius.
Right.
I'm on board so far. Keep going.
Okay. So I go to Walmart. I get my few things. I'm in the checkout lane. A friend calls. I answer the phone. What are you doing? So we're chit-chatting as I'm checking out. And, it was all great. Leave Walmart. I get halfway to the football stadium, which is about 20 minutes from
the
our
middle
home.
school football game.
The middle school
Gotcha.
football game, right? Armed with my deodorant, which could probably be shared amongst the middle schoolers in the audience.
You sent pictures. I totally understand.
Right. Halfway there, still talking to my friend, and realized I forgot to get the $20 that I got out of the bank account.
So some random Joe is now $20 wealthier because of your generosity?
Frantically, expletive, got off the phone with my friend and realized the next exit went to our bank because I still had to have cash.
Yeah.
So I exited that highway and turned to go to our bank, all the while calling our neighborhood Walmart because I sure didn't want to call you. And 2 phone calls and 15 press this for this and that for that. Finally got a hold of someone. I was like, listen, I got cash out. I forgot to get it. Can you see? She's like, what's the register number? I had my handy dandy receipt, gave her the register number. She went to look. I was like, okay, there's hope that somebody turned in this $20. A good Samaritan.
The goodness
right?
of humanity.
A good Samaritan, right?
Yep, gotcha.
She came back to the phone and she's like, it's not there, and nobody turned it in. So I proceeded to get $20 out of our bank account. So $20 is now lost forever, which would be a funny enough story.
Oh, jeez. It goes on.
Except this is the third time I've done this.
Oh, my gosh. So you just like randomly pull cash out of our account and like leave it for, I mean, you're ultimately passing it forward, right?
This is the third time, but it's only the first time I haven't been able to recover it.
And only the first time you've told me about it.
Exactly. So you know what? You need to be thanking me right now because
Do I? I think the guy that followed you in the line needs to be thanking you.
For like a brief moment, I had considered getting cash for the football game and also cash we needed later this week for the cleaning crew. And so that would have been a whole lot more that would have been lost forever. So it was only $20.
So what you're saying, I should be thanking you for this situation. Okay.
So that's my confession that I have sat on now for well over 24 hours because
there's so many Hail Marys that you needed to be doing right now.
If I did this the first time I did this, I think the cashier saw what I had done and kind of chased me out of the store like, ma'am, you forgot your money. It's like, oh, thank you. So that was my first time. The second time we were traveling, and I had to run to the store and get cash. And so I did this again, the same kind of thing. And I realized it and ran back in, and thankfully someone had turned it in, a good Samaritan. But yesterday, in fact, in our like northwest side of town, someone took the money.
Well, I mean, as they should, because, well,
Yeah. So anyways, there's my confession. First world problems, or hashtag first world problems. We're now $20 poor. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to give to the Randall Foundation. As a matter of fact, we do have
because we give away money all the time.
Not all the time. But if you would like to give to our October giving campaign, you like how I worked that in?
Oh, wow. That was very impressive.
You can visit goodfaithmedia.org and participate in our giving campaign. So, anyways, that's my confession.
Well, that is a good confession.
Right? I mean, I held on to that for a while.
Well, it sounds like you've held it on 3 times over the course of several years.
It's true. It's true. So what else have you got for us that's like fun and non-consequential?
Well, again, it's been such a heavy couple of weeks. Lots of craziness going not only in the world, but in Congress. But I did find a story that you found quite interesting, and it has to do with a frog.
So before we tell the story about a frog, I didn't realize you're going to pitch it back to me, but I will say this. I have found the key for those of you lady friends out there who are cold-natured, or, man friends who are cold-natured. I have found the ultimate deterrent for having your male boss or male coworkers enter your office and bother you and mansplain to you throughout your workday.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so do tell.
There's probably so much problematic about what I just said. We should probably talk about the Middle East. It would provide less hate mail.
Exactly.
Anywho, so it's mid-October, right? It's that time where it's getting a little bit crisp outside,
yep.
Right? And so you know what I automatically
Mornings are cold,
right.
Evenings are cold, so go on.
I walk in my office, I close the door, and I turn my space heater on. So today, I happened to post a picture on social media just that my space heater was reporting for duty, like salute, right?
Yep, I saw it.
Apparently you did, because a little while later you cracked the door open before you entered and said, "How hot is it in here?"
Because it's such a freaking sauna during the winter.
So you weren't even going to come into my office. I'm like, oh, I have stumbled onto something.
I've got to get rid of my sweaters, my jeans. I got to put on Bahama shorts.
I do remember this.
And a tank top just to go in your office.
So
in the dead of winter.
Because your office is upstairs, mine's downstairs.
Right.
So anytime you come up or down to, chat about something and my heater's on, you'll sit in my chair by the door and you just beat up.
Beat up with sweat.
Like I can't stay in here anymore. So pro tip, yes, if you want to keep the hot-natured boss or coworkers who might, mansplain to you during the day out of your office, just a little space heater by your feet works wonders. But that leads into the next story that you sent me, doesn't it?
Well, I hope it doesn't in every office situation, but go ahead.
Well, not an office situation, but it's sort of relatable. Again, we should have talked about the Middle East.
Picasso. Go ahead.
Right.
Cut that ear off.
So apparently there's this thing that female frogs do. Let me find it again. Called tonic immobility. Do you know what this is?
No.
This is legit because it was a CNN story that you found and sent to me and like, haha, this is funny. I'm like, we need to talk about this. So apparently a female frog who is being approached by a male frog will fake her death to get him to leave her alone. And to the point where she will like stiffen up and the male frog will believe that she's dead.
Right.
And leave her alone.
Yep.
And so you watch, if you want to Google this, it's a CNN story. You can see the video of this female frog who, and the male frog leaves her alone. It was hysterical.
It was so funny.
And I shall not say relatable, but it was just.
What?
It was funny.
I shall not say it's relatable.
So I think the parallel or the sermon illustration, if we shall bring one to the show, is that she only reawakened or responded when another female frog was introduced into the container. Then all of a sudden she emerged. I'm not sure what the parallel is here, but I'm pretty sure we can draw some sort of conclusion.
Oh, I'm quite certain.
So yeah. So what else of fun, lighthearted first world problems news can you?
Well, I think I do need to correct my faux pas because every artist out there in the audience is saying it wasn't Picasso, it was Van Gogh that you're thinking about who cut off his ear.
I didn't say anything about cutting off an ear. I'm just talking about aesthetic.
Exactly. I just misrepresented the artist. So I apologize for all that.
Send your mail to Mitch at goodfaithmedia.org. No, I'm just talking about the aesthetic here. It's likely going to be a Picasso, ear or no ear.
Well, true. So, okay. So the other story that I had was out of Portugal. Apparently, the FA, who oversees the Global Football Network, which is for us American soccer, has decided the importance of showing sportsmanship within the game. So besides a yellow card, which is caution, and a red card that is you're absolutely out of the game, you've committed a foul that's so heinous, say it together, heinous, that you can no longer play, they have introduced, and hand of God, the white card.
What is a white card?
Missy, if you exemplify the ideal of being a sportsman within the game, you are now issued a white card.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Why? I think it's wonderful.
That is so dumb. Okay, so when you play a game with somebody,
yes,
like I'm pretty competitive. Like your
no,
goal,
no. You're not pretty competitive. You are very competitive.
Your goal is to obliterate your opponent.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen.
Right? Okay, but let's clarify. I'm talking about a game, right? I'm not talking about in life, in truth, in a game.
Trust me, I have played plenty of games with you of skip-bo, of everything, and
Scrabble.
Yeah, I mean, you obliterate me.
Yes, because that's the
I
goal.
don't care.
I don't need a white card. I just need the W. That's all I need. The yellow and the red cards are there to make sure I do it somewhat ethically. Right? Right?
Okay, go ahead. So much to unpack there, but go right ahead.
I think I probably need to stop talking now.
No, you're right. So you're not a fan of the white card?
No, I mean, I have not read the story. Maybe there's a good reason for it that I have not considered yet. But my first reaction is, no.
Yeah, no acknowledgement of sportsmanship.
No.
Is that why for the juice boxes and orange peels are for after the game?
Yeah. That's your consolation is you get snacks at the end of the game.
Okay,
but no, when you're on the pitch and you're playing the game, you have one goal, and that's the W, not the white card.
Okay, well, I don't really know how to segue that into the doctrine of discovery.
Well, you could, but it's going to make me look real bad.
It's going to make you look really bad. I'll let the audience decide on that. But you and I sat down with Philip Arnold this week, who's a professor at Syracuse University. He's got a brand new book out titled The Urgency of Indigenous Values. Got a conference coming up that we're attending as Good Faith Media in December, talking about the doctrine of Christian discovery. It's a great conversation. But it doesn't sound like you're a fan of it.
I feel like you just kind of threw me under the bus.
I so threw you under the bus.
With that last story, knowing exactly how I would respond.
Yeah, I knew where this conversation was going, and yes,
and then
I did.
Let's talk about the doctrine of discovery. Yes, thanks for that.
All right, so all of you out there who like the white card and all of those who don't, stay tuned. We've got a great interview coming up. You know, Missy, I really enjoy recording this podcast with you each and every week.
Do you?
Well, but this is not the only thing we do at Good Faith Media.
It's not. We have so many offerings for you. We have a plethora of podcasts, videos, news and opinion articles, Bible studies, books, and much, much more. Find us at goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Philip P. Arnold is the Associate Professor of the Department of Religion at Syracuse University, as well as a core faculty member of Native American and Indigenous Studies. Philip is working with Syracuse and the Doctrine of Discovery nonprofit to host a December conference titled The Religious Origins of White Supremacy, Johnson v. McIntosh, and the Doctrine of Christian Discovery. Philip's most recent book, The Urgency of Indigenous Values, is available right now. Philip, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thanks, Mitch and Missy. Good to be with you.
Now, Philip, I do have to admit, we had a conversation a few weeks ago working on another project, and you told me about the book. I ordered it. I got it in hand, and I'm showing it to you. The audience can't see it, but it is highlighted, has all kinds of little markers in it. So congratulations on the book.
Thank you. It's been decades in the making, as I like to say. So it's been a labor of love.
Good.
Well, it is well worn in our home. So Phil, I want to begin by asking a couple of general questions. And the first one is just, what was your motivation for writing the book? And then second, help us understand why you chose the word urgency in the title as it relates to Indigenous values.
Yeah, all good questions. So there's a personal reason and a professional one. So the personal reason is that I'm married to a Mohawk Haudenosaunee woman. We have Haudenosaunee children, and we've been married almost 40 years now, and we've been working together on a variety of issues around Native American Indigenous traditions. And the professional reason really is that I'm in the academic study of religion and really critically reflecting on the area of what's now called Native American or Indigenous religions. And we live in the heartland of the Haudenosaunee, who are better known to your audience probably as the Iroquois or Six Nations. The Iroquois is the name that was assigned to them by the Jesuits. Their own name for themselves is the Haudenosaunee, or people of the Longhouse. And so being in this area, teaching in this area, physically being here, and I'll talk more about that as we go along, but just being here and teaching in this area is why I felt the need to address these issues in the book. The urgency piece has two meanings as well. Of course, we're in the era of a number of different urgent matters facing us. The matter of environmental catastrophe is with us always, and who better to address that issue than Indigenous peoples who've been here, before the Ice Age. So those, that's one urgency, and I feel like their value system can be embraced more fully than it has been in the past. And secondly, I think for me, it becomes a method, on how to interact and collaborate with Indigenous peoples. The question is, well, what do you talk about? When you're dealing, I don't really want to think of them as my informants, about their traditions. I really want to have a conversation about some of these urgent matters that we're facing. And I think, so therefore, focusing on matters of urgent mutual concern, like climate change, is one way to have a good conversation interculturally, And so on the one hand, we have urgent matters that we're addressing, and then also on the other hand, it becomes a way of really working together.
I'm so glad that you included the term urgency in the title. You also refer to it quite often within the book, especially in the first parts of the book when you're talking about environmentalism and creation care. As a citizen of the Muskogee Creek, one of the things that I have learned over the years, coming to understand my culture and my ancestors more so than I did growing up, is that as I learn more about them, what I've discovered is that it seems as though their way of life really coincides with a lot of what, as a Christian at least, what I read in the Bible, especially in the New Testament in the person of Jesus. This indigenous tribal type of mentality that, is not self-centered, is not human-centric, and we got a question about that later on in the pod. But it just, this idea that and I'm going to use a really coded word here that Christians often refer to, this idea of salvation. The idea of salvation is that there are looming problems on the horizon, and we need to have this salvation come and rescue us. And if you look at the indigenous peoples, this urgency may provide us a way to live that is sustainable, that we can replicate here today. And I think it's needed right now more than ever.
As I said, I live in the heartland of the Haudenosaunee, and this is the central fire. So in the homelands of the Onondaga Nation, which is the central fire of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is a confederation of 6 separate nations. But and their relationship historically, their relationship to Christianity has been a rocky one, to say the least. Perhaps with this conference, we can begin to have a conversation about how Christianity historically has been weaponized, essentially, against Native people, and that becomes a kind of problematic feature of how we address these intercultural dialogues. So I think the urgency we're discussing then, in the context of the doctrine of discovery, is illustrated in various moves, like in boarding, the residential boarding school system, or other things that have been utilized. It's a tough history, and it's not. Well, I can give you a story. I'll illustrate this with one story. For example, in 1756, Jesuit missionaries they were representatives of France, and they came into Onondaga Nation territory, and they built a fort on the sacred Onondaga Lake, right? But they came with them, they came with the deed to 600 square miles of Onondaga territory. And so they were forcefully asked to leave just 20 months later or so, in 1658. So this is recorded in the Jesuit relations as very differently than the oral tradition of the Onondaga Nation, right? So of the Haudenosaunee. And so and since that time, there has been no Catholic church on Onondaga Nation territory. So we know something very disruptive happened. But at this conference, and we've been having a series of conversations with Catholics and Catholic leadership, we're going to have a bishops' conference. Bishop Lucia here, a local Catholic bishop, has been very active in the area of the doctrine of Christian discovery, has been advocating for this to be on the docket, so to speak, of American bishops. And so we're going to have a bishops panel, and it's going to be responded to by an Onondaga clan mother. So, this to me presents, we have to look at the stark history, the excesses of that history, as a way towards, a kind of conversation for the future, right? So that becomes like one illustration of what can happen. And we'll get more into the doctrine of discovery, but I think that that's the sort of thing that both Christians and indigenous peoples, and Onondaga by and large are not Christian people, that they can come together, right, and have a conversation.
And not only are they not Christian people, one of the things that we do in this deconstruction and this process of decolonizing the conversation is to redefine the misconceptions that are out there as we impose our colonized ideas upon other cultures. One of those in particular, Phil, is the idea of indigenous religion. You stated in your book that term alone is an oxymoron, because a lot of times we look at other cultures and say, oh, well, that is their religion. But
right.
You claim that you've not talked to one indigenous person that has a term for religion. So if they don't practice religion, what are they practicing, Phil?
No, that's a very good point. I mean, they do have longhouse, right? So longhouse is the organizing principle. So, for example, I mean, just to give you some context here. So there's 574, 75 federally recognized Native American nations or tribes in the country today. And of those 575, it keeps going up too, because there are new nations recognized from time to time. So of those 575, really only 3 are still run by their pre-colonial or pre-American system of government that is not by the BIA, of Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I know this sounds a little like a diversion, but it's important. So those 3 are all Haudenosaunee. They are governed by their ancient protocol called, that came with the Great Law of Peace, called the Great Law of Peace, and they're organized around their clan system at the Longhouse. And so the Longhouse then is the center of all political, economic, if you want, ceremonial activity for the Onondaga. And the Onondaga, therefore, they do not accept money from the federal government, for example. They do not have casinos and that sort of thing. They're not run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And the Longhouse system is overseen by women. It's matrilineal clan system. And those women choose the male leaders to represent the clan. So it's this radical democratic system of governance. So when I would bring my class down to the Onondaga Nation, for example, my Native American religions class or Indigenous religions class, they would always insist that what they have is not religion, right? It becomes a little embarrassing, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm an academic in religion, they say we don't have religion. So then how do we communicate cross-culturally with one another? And that's kind of what I'm trying to lay out in the book. That and by the way, this clan-based system connects them to the land. The Onondaga are known as people of the hills, and they live in their traditional territory, which ties them to these ancient drumlins in this area of the world. So those clans oversee all kinds of ceremonial activity, but we can have a system or a conversation about values, Mm-hmm. And that's how we organize the Scano Great Law Peace Center, which I hope you'll be able to see when you come up.
Yeah, I do.
Because the Scano Center, it's Scano means peace, but it also means peace that's only possible between people when they are in proper relationship to the natural world. And so we decided right away that we were going to have a values approach at the Scano Center. I know I'm moving around a little bit, but for example, the Thanksgiving address, the Onondaga and Haudenosaunee don't pray. They don't refer to it as prayer. They refer to it as an address where they address, the non-human beings of the natural world that are responsible for our well-being, our survival as human beings. So some of those concepts, right, in terms of your process of decolonizing our conversations about religion, it's very important that we acknowledge that, that what looks like prayer isn't seen that way. It's not a petition to a deity or something. It's an address, an expression of gratitude, right? And what happens ceremonially in the Longhouse is not religion, because it doesn't have to do with faith so much as giving something back to the natural world, to the spiritual dimension of the natural world, to creation, right? In a way that will promote a more viable future, right? So I think I was trying to lay out some of those ideas in the book, so we could get to a sense of what values are, and why they would be, how we could incorporate some of them into, the modern contemporary world.
Well, I was telling Missy about the part, specifically about the part, or we were talking about the part when you mentioned that the women are the ones that elected the leaders and the chiefs, and she thought that was a really good idea to implement today.
I mean, that's how my house runs. I'm not sure about yours.
That's how my house runs too. So,
So, Phil, it's so funny that you started talking about the federally recognized tribes. You said the 575. That was actually part of the next question, when you said only 3 operate under the pre-colonial clan system. So, just briefly revisit that. Tell us why that is, and why.
Yeah, no, it is a mystery, I'll say, because well, I'll just say, and I'm not saying anything that they wouldn't say about themselves, but the Onondaga are very stubborn people. and as a lot of Native people are, as we know.
No words from you, Missy.
I'm not saying a
word. No, nothing personal. I think so the Bureau of Indian Affairs was created essentially to oversee Native territories, right? And when in 1924, there was the Citizenship Act, the U.S. bestowed on all Native Americans U.S. citizenship. Well, that sounds really good in a way, but the Onondaga said, no, we will not be citizens of the United States. And in fact, they went to went to Washington, D.C. I've seen the documents, right, where they say, you can't make us citizens. In other words, they stuck to this notion of sovereignty, which is, after all, in the Constitution of the United States. Those treaties are fundamental in the Constitution of the United States, and that system of sovereignty, essentially, the Onondaga said, if we give up our sovereignty, those treaties will be null and void. And so we're going to stick to our sovereign status. And it was there that way. For example, Onondaga Faithkeeper Oren Lyons puts it this way: you can't have a treaty with yourself. So if they were to become citizens of the United States, then they would not be able to maintain those treaties. So they're so stubborn for the last 100 years since the Citizenship Act. They've been traveling on their own passports. They have their own documents.
Really?
When they travel internationally.
Wow.
And so the Haudenosaunee Nationals team will travel on their own Haudenosaunee passports. And if they can't, if the countries deny them, as they did in 2010 over in Manchester, England, they won't go. So it's as I said, these are very stubborn people, and they've kept to their sovereignty in the face of really some very extreme measures. So I think that's why the Haudenosaunee have been so instrumental at international meetings like the United Nations, advocating for the rights of indigenous peoples, where other nations, you could say, can be controlled by the United States. they can't be. They've proven that over the last 100 years. So, yeah, the three nations, I failed to mention the three nations that have not accepted a BIA government are Onondaga Nation, so I've been talking about, the Tonawanda-Seneca, another nation of the Haudenosaunee, and the Tuscarora. So those three are all part of the Confederacy.
Wow. Well, Phil, I've got one last question for you before we turn it over. And this has been a fascinating conversation. Again, there's so much in the book that I would like to talk about, but we just don't have time. Plus, we don't want to give it all away. We want people to go buy the book, and they can pick it up wherever they purchase their reading materials. But there's one moment in the book that really brought tears to my eyes, and it was the conversation about the 1613 two-row wampum agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch. And there's this beautiful image of a belt, and it's a stream and two canoes rowing down the stream. And I just thought it was a beautiful image of coexistence and respecting one another as human beings and as cultures, living harmoniously as you move down this journey of the river. But unfortunately, we know history. We can read, and it seems as though one of those paths often tends to go over to the other to dominate the other and impose its belief systems on that. In fact, you write in the chapter, Pay Attention, expansionist cultures of Europe created an intellectual tradition that placed human beings at the center of the world and assumed that human beings have the ability and responsibility to know the universal truths of all things. Phil, is the idea of a human-centric worldview the prime contradiction among the Anglo-European cultures and the indigenous cultures?
I think you're spot on. That's exactly right. I mean, you've said a lot right there. And I think the two-row wampum, so there's a long tradition of wampum, goes right back to here at Onondaga Lake and the founding of the Great Law of Peace. And the wampum then came, the wampums that came out of that had to do with consoling, condoling people that are in grief, and the Haudenosaunee in that 1613 wampum belt with the Dutch were saying we're acknowledging your grief, the difficulties of the lives that you've lived and being here in this place, and we want to remain together in this place, but you have to be able to respect the non-human beings that support our lives here together. And so the Haudenosaunee in their canoe travel down the river of life, and the Dutch or the Europeans in their boat travel down the river of life side by each and don't interfere with one another, right? But that could be said of all other things as well. Mm-hmm. To leave the world as pristine and as healthy as we possibly can is the way to have peace between us.
I love that.
And that's those three rows of those three white rows between the two purple rows are called the covenant chain. And that covenant chain is that we need to work together for a more peaceful world, work together for a more proper and viable relationship to the world around us. And those three rows are peace, freedom, and together forever.
I love that.
So that to me becomes a way of working together. Now, something else you said, this kind of hubris of humanity, right, that we're all having to grapple with right now in various ways, I think is really the issue here. I see it in the university, for example, where academics feel as if or think they can understand all things, and to me that becomes a roadblock for really working collaboratively, because if you think about it, if you work with people, if you work with Indigenous peoples rather than report on them, right? If you work with them, then you're not in control of the data, so to speak. You're not in control of what you can say. Right. You have to work together. So knowledge, therefore, is produced together. It's not produced just out of the minds of some, academic, scholar or something like that. So for me, that becomes then another facet of the working method of collaboration that I think is very important to me and for our colleagues.
Well said, sir.
So, Phil, how can our listeners learn more about your work and about this conference that's coming up?
Well, we have a website called doctrineofdiscovery.org, and that, we just put up the schedule for the conference, and I'm very happy that you all will be part of the conference and doing podcasts there. We are going to have Robbie Jones as one of the keynote presenters, and Thea Butler, who's someone else who's been working fervently on what she calls white evangelical racism. That's the title of her book. So we have a lot of different constituencies coming, a lot of Christian people who have repudiated the doctrine of discovery. And so a number of churches, a number of Christian organizations have repudiated the doctrine of discovery. About over 300 have repudiated the doctrine of discovery. So on our website, we have a number of different readings or different small, short readings. Just last week, we put up a sermon by an Episcopal, kind of an activist, Christian activist, who was talking about the doctrine of discovery in his church, right? He was addressing it to the congregation. And so I asked him, I said, can we just put the sermon up on? I mean, it's not something I would normally do in an academic setting, but there you go. We have, biblical quotations and all these kinds of references. So I think, we're trying to make that a resource for a number of different people. We also have a lot of information on the conference, the schedule and other things. So, and the registration link. I have to mention too that it's sponsored by the Henry Luce Foundation, which is a major granting organization that has been very active in this area of religion and racism in the past. I don't think they would have been like 10 years ago. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people moving in this direction. And what we're doing with the conference is trying to connect the dots. There are environmentalists working on this. There are lawyers working on this. There are Indigenous peoples. We're going to have Maori people, Sami people, people from Brazil, all kinds of folks. So I think the website is the best thing. And then, of course, the book. The book is our most recent attempt at trying to get this message out.
Well, Philip Arnold, thank you so much for joining us this week on Good Faith Weekly. You're the third guest that we've had on over the last few months. We had Betty Lyons on earlier, and then Robbie Jones was on last week, and now you talking about this very, very important topic about the doctrine of Christian discovery and its ramifications even today. And I appreciate your addition of adding the urgency of us retaining these Indigenous values. The book is The Urgency of Indigenous Values, and you can pick it up now. And Phil, we really look forward to seeing you in Syracuse in December. But before we let you go, sir, Missy's got one last question that she wants to ask you.
So, Phil, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of the work that you do in our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
That's such a good question. I'm a bit overwhelmed at the moment. There's so much work that needs to be done, and I think it has to be told by all of us. This work has to address all of us where we live, and And I just welcome anyone out there that's listening to come to Syracuse, New York, Onondaga Nation territory, to learn more about the Haudenosaunee and really all kinds of things related to the American identity. And that's the message we're trying to get out, right? That we are more, American society is so much more indigenous than we realize.
Yeah.
Let me say this: dig deep where you live.
That's a good piece of wisdom.
I love that.
Phil, thank you so much for joining us, and Good Faith Media. We'll see you and the others in New York at Syracuse, on the campus of Syracuse University in December for this incredible conference. So check out the conference and the website, doctrineofdiscovery.org, as well as Phil's new book, The Urgency of Indigenous Values. Thank you, sir. Great having you on. Well, Missy, I don't know about you, but as somebody who really thinks this stuff is interesting, I really enjoyed our conversation with Philip.
I really enjoy just examining the way that systems that have been in place for our entire existence that we never questioned should be questioned. And, of course, the doctrine of discovery is one of those. But there were two things in particular in the book and in the interview that stood out, I feel like, to both of us, as we've discussed a few moments ago. One being that Native Americans don't really have a word or a concept of religion.
Right.
So I want to talk about that for a little bit and what that looks like.
Well, I think you're exactly right. First, acknowledging that we covered a lot of material. There's a lot of content that we discussed, but there's so many things that are tangible and relatable to what we're dealing with now. One is this notion of religion. So when you and I define religion, we have this conception of what that means. A lot of it surrounds worship. A lot of it surrounds how we view the world and our evangelical fervor to win people for the cause of Jesus Christ.
I would say it's two things. It's your belief system, what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And it's how you're getting into heaven.
Yeah.
Like those are the two principles.
You may want to reverse those two in their priority.
I mean, yes. Well, one leads to the other. They're very closely interconnected.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the two principles we were brought up in, is what you believe and how do you get into heaven.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, there's this celestial ending that is overarching and affects everything that we do within this world. For the indigenous people, there's not this concept of religion, but this concept of existence. And how do we as human beings exist within this symbiotic relationship of how we would define the living and non-living, or the natural and unnatural. And so that is what is really fascinating to me. And I can see that also playing out within the biblical narrative, because the biblical narrative is filled with this tribalism and this very indigenous understanding of the world, not corrupted by the European idea of capitalism and everything that is negative about the world we live in right now. So I just really love that concept of not defining ourselves by our religious convictions, but more so defining ourselves as humans living within a cultural system as we understand it.
Well, just being part of the world,
Yes.
being part of the existence of our planet, of our solar system, of all the things that we exist within. How do we responsibly care for that and for each other, top to bottom? That we're not domineering the land or the creatures that are in it, but we're trying to be respectful. And how do we care for the totality of existence?
And I think that is probably one of the biggest advancements that I have made personally And when I say advancement, I really do mean this as personal advancement. I understand that a lot of people have a lot of other thoughts and views on this, and I respect those. But for me, I remember standing in front of a crowd one time with our dear, dear friend and our prayers and thoughts, and I don't mean that in the most tritely way, Imam and Chauncey. And I said to the crowd and pointed to Ahmad and said, I realized I was at a different venture in my faith. Not my religion, but my faith. When I stopped seeing Ahmad as a competitor for souls and started seeing him as a brother. Mm-hmm. That acknowledging that we both have different cultures and quote unquote different religions.
Mm-hmm. As we define those as humans,
yes.
We have created that. Yeah.
But we have this symbiotic relationship of a created being. Mm-hmm. And that we need to acknowledge our humanity and our plight within this world because there's so many more commonalities we have as human beings. And even within our faith and quote unquote religions that bring us together.
So we're going to circle back to that in a moment. I have something to share. I have another thing to share with you.
Okay. Another confession? How much money did I lose this time?
Sort of, but not really. Because I want to touch on, I know you really were very moved by the two, what is it? The belt.
Oh yeah, the two row
wampum belt, and
yeah.
so I want
the treaty between the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch.
I know you want to talk about that for a moment before I circle back. So, tell our listeners more about that and what it meant to you.
The first thing that struck me was this was a concept presented by the indigenous culture. I'm having a hard time vocalizing this because so often indigenous cultures are seen as nomadic or Neanderthalish, mm-hmm. uncivilized. Mm-hmm. And that's the narrative we've been taught. But then you encounter stories like this. And the Haudenosaunee who come up with this idea and present it to the Europeans who are, in their view, culturally superior to them,
right?
Religiously superior to them, economically superior to them in every way, who says, we can coexist. Mm-hmm. Let's create an existence where both of us are traveling down this river of life together, side by side in our own canoes, respecting each other's cultures, respecting each other as created beings, but acknowledging we're on the same path. But there's a problem.
What's that?
The problem is, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but the white culture always drifts in the other lane to dominate the river. They have to own the river. They can't share it.
So as much as we kind of began this episode with, we were really trying not to get in the weeds with the situation in the Middle East for many reasons. But before we came on to record, you were up here setting up, and I have to tell a little backstory, which if you're a regular listener or follower of Good Faith Media, reader of any of our material, this will be a refresher for you. But as you mentioned earlier, our friend Ahmad and Chauncey, who grew up in Beirut as a Palestinian refugee, mm-hmm. and who was taught in school by a Catholic nun whose name translates in English to mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And he survived the Shabbat massacre. Correct me if I'm getting any of the details wrong.
100% right.
Where the Maronite Christians came in and slaughtered his people.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teenager, he hid for 3 days to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
And like you've said many times before, he was primed to be radicalized against Christian people.
And Judaism. Because
absolutely.
the state of Israel
allowed that
sieged,
to happen.
City of Beirut to allow this to happen.
But we use him as an example so many times. And like you've said before, he is the best example of Jesus you've ever seen.
Yep.
And I wholeheartedly agree. But he said, the Jesus that mercy showed me was not the Jesus that these perpetrators brought into my land.
Mm-hmm.
And he chose mercy, and every day he chooses mercy. So fast forward, he is now here in Oklahoma. That's how you two connected. And he's the mom. And every social justice ministry here in Oklahoma City that the Muslims run is named Mercy,
mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So as we're getting ready to record tonight, and we had talked beforehand about we were just going to try to keep it light and not get into the horrificness that's happening in the Middle East and the conflict. I had not played my Wordle yet today.
Wordle.
So I had to get that done so I don't disrupt my streak.
Well,
right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you got to do. I mean, there are priorities. There's your quiet time.
Right. Wait, what?
Your meditation. And then
no, Wordle.
There's your Wordle.
I didn't get Wordle done today because somebody started texting me before I got out of bed this morning. So I was getting that Wordle completed today as you were getting set up again. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I feel like sometimes the universe, God, the creator, the spirit, sometimes just speaks. And do you want to take a guess as to what the Wordle answer was
Let me
today?
see.
And
Let me roll through the Wordle.
I'm not giving any spoilers because we record a couple of days ahead of time.
Yeah. So it's not probably $20. It's not Van Gogh or Picasso. I'm going to go ahead and say it was Mercy.
It was Mercy. Was the answer to Wordle today. And I just got teary-eyed because I thought, with everything that's going on, with this interview that we had today, talking about the doctrine of discovery, talking about, it's all about our desire for whatever reason to dominate and own land and claim territory, mm-hmm. which is so fallible in our thinking. And I don't have answers to the specifics, but all I know at the end of the day is that mercy and love and two canoes going down together in life need to somehow prevail. I don't know how to make it happen on a global scale. All I can do is make choices in my daily life that help propagate that end. But anyways, I wanted to share that with you, that just happened, and I feel like it was a little bit of a divine moment.
I really have nothing to add except amen, amen, amen. I mean, you just said it all.
All right. So do you...
Well, Missy and I may both have tears in our eyes, so we're going to step away and wipe those tears away. But our prayers, our hope for the situation in the Middle East, for the situation here in the United States, is that mercy prevails and that love and understanding and hope and mutual respect for each other's cultures can be the predominant ideal for who we are as human beings. And I want you to always remember that this was brought to you by the indigenous cultures of North America and in indigenous cultures around the world. This is the importance of and urgency of discovering indigenous values.
But I also want to note that related to this, that Ahmad did post today that they have lost 4 members of their family in Gaza during this conflict. And so I definitely want to be sure that our listeners, that we lift them up in prayer for comfort and for peace.
Yeah, I mean, we know Jewish families who've lost family members and friends in the massacre that took place last Saturday, and we also know Palestinians who've lost family. It's just another reminder that if we allow the systems that are prevalent in our world to dominate our understanding of how the world is constructed, then oftentimes destruction and death follow, and pain and agony and tears follow. We have to find a better way.
Right. And as you said last week, sometimes our tears are the only prayers we can offer. And I feel like we're still there. I had hoped that wouldn't be the case this week. I hope it's not the case next week. But right now, that's kind of still where we're at.
So let the tears flow. Let your prayers be lifted up. And may you have a blessed and hopeful weekend. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.